تميت الأنام وتحيي العظام وتنشي الخلائق جيلا فجيلا.
Yes, I wondered whether you were concerned about the potential for the radical Islam group to become involved in mosques around the United States and sort of dominate the voice of Islam in the United States, and what you and your organization could do in response to this.
That's a great question. Thank you. The challenge in American Islam in particular is that we do not have a hierarchical church structure. In fact, we have a very loose kind of voluntary association. And because of that, each community is individual. So there's no, our organization has no authority to go into any mosque and demand that they run a certain way or speak a certain way. But what we can do and what we are doing is developing a set of best practices for mosques and Islamic centers to develop guidelines for those communities, how their governance structure should work, what qualifications there should be for imams, what are the kind of, what's the kind of training that an imam should have, and to then, once we have developed these guidelines, offer training programs. So we have a number of training programs for imams to help them understand their context, especially if they've come from another country, because the reality is that many communities are still bringing imams who have been trained in other countries, who may be good preachers, they may be good theologians, but they don't understand necessarily the context of their community here. So we're putting a lot of energy into that, trying to help orient them, train them, and then ultimately and ideally have our own seminaries in this country where we can have our own children and our own young people be a generation of leaders.
You say that American Muslims have a special obligation to help stop the violence that is committed by Muslims in the name of Islam. Why do American Muslims have this special duty to do that?
Well, as I said before, we don't necessarily have any special power, but we do have an obligation because we have the freedom to talk about these issues. And the reality is that most Muslims in the world live in environments where they don't have that freedom because their political rights are suppressed, their freedom of speech is very limited, they may not have access to the resources that we have. So there's a moral obligation for us to exercise that kind of leadership. And it doesn't mean there's anything special or unique about Americans, but we have this rich diverse Muslim community. We have Muslims from every part of the world. So we can draw upon their experiences, their heritage, their perspective, and debate these issues in a way, in a free way, so that we can then encourage a discussion in other countries. The other thing is that we're Americans, we're part of this country, and the United States is heavily engaged in Muslim countries, in their economic policies, their political policies. So we also need to look at it as American citizens. How can we be a bridge of understanding between the United States, our policies, and Muslims in other countries?
تميت الأنام وتحيي العظام وتنشي الخلائق جيلا فجيلا.